What's up, everybody? We made it to Friday. Oh man, been I shouldn't say that it's been a long week for me because it hasn't really been a long week. Because usually, whenever you say something like it's been a long week, you're usually implying that it's been a bad week. And for me, man, it's not really been a bad week because my manager was on vacation this week, and my director, which is basically my manager's boss, I don't know, man. He's kind of detached, or at least siloed away from me. And so that's a good thing. And I'm not saying that because he's a bad person necessarily or anything like that. I'm just saying that because it's nice to be able to kind of have some level of autonomy. It's nice to be able to kind of come into work and not have to worry about some asshole breathing down your neck. And I think all of us can appreciate that. And so in a way that's kind of a good thing that they're like that. But anyway, this week it has been a long week though, in the sense that it's just been long. It's been one of those kinds of weeks when you come into an office, you're sitting there, you're trying to kind of maintain productivity, you're helping people out, you're talking to people that need your help, you're doing things in systems that you need to do things in. And whenever the dust settles from that daily day to day stuff, or that hourly to hourly stuff, you're left, I guess you're just kind of left thinking about things and trying to devise ways to maintain your own independent productivity, which is something that a lot of knowledge workers deal with. Now, there's probably some people out there that are watching this that are going to wonder what a knowledge worker is. And I don't know if it's like this everywhere, but I know that where I work, a knowledge worker is basically somebody who deals in a lot of the stuff that requires analysis. Okay, it requires problem solving, critical analysis, and that means basically anybody that deals a lot with systems or procedures that require in-depth critical analysis. And that can be anyone ranging from a computer programmer to a report designer to system architects to managers and directors. There's a lot of stuff that falls into the knowledge worker bucket. And by my saying this, man, I want to emphasize that it's not. I hope I'm not coming across as if I'm some sort of self-obsessed arrogant asshole, because when I say knowledge worker, that to some people I imagine that might come across as if I'm like, I don't know, like I'm an arrogant, self-obsessed asshole that thinks he's more intellectually superior than other people, man. And that is not at all what I'm saying, because like, for example, where I work, there's facilities management type people that go around on they go around and basically do anything ranging from maintaining landscaping stuff to changing HVAC things. Your your more or less blue collar type of workers. And I've known enough blue collar workers in my life to truly feel intimidated by some of the things that they know how to do that I don't. And I feel fucking stupid because of it. And I wish I knew how to do some of those kinds of things, changing an AC compressor, or I don't know, man, dealing with certain kinds of yard work that entail things like trimming trees in certain ways. That kind of shit, man, I know nothing about. And I wish I knew how to do that kind of stuff, like carpentry and things like that, because if I did, man, I wouldn't be in some of the problems that I feel like I'm in half the time. with my house, or just basic kind of everyday kind of stuff that guys like that know how to do. And I admire those types of people, man. But understand that whenever I'm saying knowledge worker, I'm not saying it from the standpoint of trying to like convey myself in a level of superiority, but rather in the sense that a knowledge worker has a particular type of it represents a particular type of classification of staff member where I work, okay? Because a knowledge worker is somebody who deals a lot with systems and processes that an institution can oftentimes depend on. And a lot of the times it depends on a lot of programming types of IT stuff that I'm kind of involved in, more or less. So anyway, I'm not trying to get on a tangent here or anything. I'm just wanting to make sure that it's understood that, man, I don't get off on being like this knowledge worker type of person. That's not who I am. I could fucking care less about that type of classification. But whenever it comes to my field or my background, a knowledge worker does represent something specific. It's not like a way of separating yourself from other kinds of backgrounds or industries or something like that. So anyway, where was I even going with this, man? It's been kind of a long week from the standpoint of just getting through the week, because there have been a lot of things that have been going on here this week. Nothing major or anything, nothing traumatic, but just stuff that's been needing to be done. Like, for example, we're my particular team right now. We're dealing with a project right now where we're trying to basically get some users out of one system into another system so that they can avoid the financial penalties that the prior system has been accruing them, because in this new system they're not going to have to worry about that. But with this new system, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of it's the kind of stuff that how do I even describe this? The new system is much more technical. It's not as easy to use as the prior system. So with the new system, we've got to try to find a way to make these non-technical users find ways to be able to use the new system without being completely trained in the new system. It's, in other words, when you put non-technical users into a technical kind of system, there's a learning curve there that causes problems. And to simplify things in this discussion here, I'm trying to find ways, or I'm trying to help my team find ways uh, to make that transition easier to deal with. And so far, that means that we've got to find ways to kind of we've got to find a new type of tool to marry to the new system that makes transitioning to the new system easier to deal with. And when you get involved in this type of stuff, man, you deal a lot with vendors or other companies that design these kinds of systems that you need in order to marry to the new system. Because we're essentially talking about a system here where, despite the fact that it does everything that we need for these new users, we've got to find a way to make the new users be able to use the new system. And so the vendor that is going to be brought on board with some of this stuff, they're going to provide us with like a tool that we plug into the new system, and that makes the users able to use the new system easier. I know that it's kind of a mouthful there, but to make a long story short, we're just trying to make the new system easier to use for non-technical users. And so this week we've been dealing a lot with that type of stuff, and there in our not really my department, but my employer has been going through a lot of turnover. There's been a lot of employees that have quit these past 5 to 10 years, and it's made stuff extremely turbulent from the standpoint of institutional continuity. Because when you're dealing with an organization, that's comprised of multiple different types of specialties. And in a day and age when efficiency and financial conservatism is of the utmost importance, you deal a lot with situations where the moment somebody quits your team or quits your organization, that can sometimes cause some major problems. And so this week, this week we lost one person, but for the past 5 years, we've lost a number of people. And every year or two, you can expect someone to quit either because they found a better job or because they can't keep up with certain kinds of things. That can be expected, and some of that is normal. But with my particular employer, it seems as if this is a massive chronic problem that leadership refuses to acknowledge. And my God, is it so frustrating when you're sitting there seeing these people quit left and right or possibly get fired left and right. At some point you realize that it's not really the employees that are the problem, man. There's a leadership problem there. And this type of shit, man, it's been on my mind for years because I've been with my employer now for the past 15 years as a full-time staff member. A little bit before that, for a number of years as other roles. So I know how the sausage is fucking made in this place. And I see the writing on the wall. I see how these leaders are with the way they do things. And it is really frustrating because there's been multiple times when I've tried to voice concerns about all of this stuff. Because this kind of shit, man, like I said, man, I've been there as a full-time staff member now for about 15 years. A little more than that. And this has been a situation that has it seems as if it's worsened through time, and nobody seems to really be either acknowledging it or doing anything about it. And I don't know what that means, man, because I feel like I almost want to believe that it kind of comes all the way from the top, of my little totem pole of supervision, I guess, if you will. And if you want to say that it comes all the way from the top, we're talking about like maybe 4 or 5 rungs above me. And in the past 5 years, man, we've really seen a lot of really good employees leave. Most of them have left on their own volition. There's been like 2 or 3 maybe that I think have been actually fired, and usually it takes a lot for that to happen where I work, man. You've really got to piss some people off or really suck at your job in order to be fired. And sometimes when you piss certain people off, even then, sometimes it's not really your fault. Sometimes, I mean, I hate to say this, man, because I know that there's 2 sides to every coin. But sometimes, man, whenever you piss someone off, you still aren't responsible for it. Sometimes it's just that person above you is trying to conflate things just to get you out of the fucking equation. And I freaking hate that, man. I hate how employers can sometimes be like that. Because even as somebody who once was a supervisor, because once upon a moon, there was one time when I was an actual supervisor for about maybe 6 people. And this all goes back to my internship that I was a part of at one point during my undergrad, because there was one point in time when during my undergrad I was an intern project coordinator. And I think back then, if I remember right, I was a supervisor for about 6 people, somewhere around there, give or take. And it was a fucking hard role, man. It was a hard job because every goddamn day I would come into the office that we had at the time, trying to do this stupid kind of stuff where I had to kind of deal with these little issues that were going on between my subordinates, analyzing their weekly reflections of the internship program that we were all part of, reporting between them and my supervisor things that were going on with all of our different projects, because the internship that I was a part of at the time, we were essentially responsible for trying to deliver certain kinds of services to about 40 nonprofits in my county, or my I should say my the county that I work in. And doing that, man, it was hard because you had to find ways to juggle all of these different kinds of dimensions to your everyday life in this job, and it caused me a lot of personal stress. It caused a lot of stress between myself and my relationships that I had at the time. And I had to find ways to kind of deal with all of that while I was dealing with my undergraduate studies. I mean, it caused a lot of personal problems between me and the people that I was supposed to be the supervisor of, which I really fucking regret, man, because a lot of those guys that worked for me, or I say work for me, but worked for my employer. They were really good people, man. Really good people, really good friends. You know, the kinds of people that you would want to help out if they were ever in some sort of problem in life. So, I mean, I don't even really know where I was going with all this. But the point is, I guess, is that my employer, it's got some leadership problems, man, and it's I don't want to say that it's necessarily worrying me, but it's definitely got me on the brink of trying to find a different employer. You know, I've been keeping my eyes open for opportunities for the past around about a year now. And in my specific area, it just fucking sucks in terms of job opportunities. I mean, I'd say in the past year, I've interviewed for about three, maybe four opportunities that I've applied to, and almost every single one of them I wound up shooting down because of the lowball offerings, or the various red flags that you can sometimes come up against whenever you're sitting there listening to the person that's representing the employer describing the opportunity. Really stupid things too. Like, for example, there was one company that I applied to. I say company, it's not really that it was a company. It was, let's just call it an employer. There was one employer that I applied to. They needed somebody to come on board, more or less, from the standpoint of being a generalist role in IT. Okay, so somebody that wasn't going to only be involved with things like what I normally do now, where I'm integrating kinds of systems together or generating certain kinds of reports. But this employer, they wanted somebody to not only do that stuff, but they wanted somebody who could also do things like routing Cat 5 cable or Cat 6, whatever it might be, setting up TVs in various ways, throughout their building, writing reports, creating, generating integrations, programmatically analyzing certain kinds of disconnection between different systems, doing all of these different things. And for about maybe, how many people? I would say around 2,000 users, if I remember right. And on a team of about maybe four at most. So, so as soon as I mean, I was trying to play ball in this interview because it was during the interview that I learned about all of these different constraints. And I told the person I was interviewing with, I told them what my minimum expectation was for a salary. Because I'm not a fucking greenhorn whenever it comes to this shit, man. I've been around the block a time or two with this type of stuff. I know what my worth is, and I know what I'm gonna settle for. And I told them what I was expecting for a salary. And the guy that I interviewed with initially, he was a good guy, man. And he was like, I saw what you put on your application for the minimum expected salary, and I don't know if we're going to be able to pull that off, but we'll go ahead and give it a shot. So I'm going to go ahead and refer you to my boss, and blah 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 blah. So that next day, I get a phone call from like the VP of Human Resources or some shit. I don't know what it was, man. But him and I have a candid discussion about what it was that I was expecting for my salary. And he just simply came out of the woodwork and he was like, we're not going to be able to pull that because, the minimum expected salary was X, Y, and Z. And what you put on your application was A, B, and C. And we can't meet that. And I was like, I understand, but I also understand too, though, what I believe I'm worth. And there is absolutely no way you're going to get me on board at what you just told me you were expecting this role to cap out at. But I told him, I was like, with all due respect, I understand what it is that you guys are trying to do, and I understand whatever kinds of financial constraints you believe you're in. So I want to respect that. So I don't want to cause any problems or anything. So it's probably best that I just go ahead and bow out. But to make a long story short, in my belief, they were really wanting to lowball me. I mean, by about 10 or 15 grand. And they were expecting me to do this role on a team of total of about 4 people. And that included the manager doing all of this stuff for about 2,000 users. And I just, at some point you get to a point to where you're like, what the fuck are you guys expecting? It's like they're expecting like a senior role being paid on internship rates. It's just not gonna fucking happen, man. So anyway, that job fell through, and then there was another job before that was in a similar kind of capacity of constraints, where it was another one of those situations where they wanted to lowball you. They wanted you to work on a team that was really small, servicing multiple different departments across the entire town. And they also wanted to bind you with a fucking beeper. And I was like, no way. There's just no way I'm going to do that. And the person at the time couldn't even tell me what kinds of like, what policies applied to the individual's workstation that was expected to fulfill this role. And that plays a major part in IT work, because if you're working on a workstation where you can't even install your own applications and shit, that causes a lot of problems for people that are trained in specific disciplines of IT. Because like for me, for example, I've got to have a certain kind of web server and things installed on my workstation that I can use as my integrated development environment. And if you can't do that kind of stuff on your workstation, that causes massive problems. And so, long story short, that job fell through. And then there was another job at a local marketing firm that was looking for a specific type of developer for a specific type of tech stack. And that fell through. So it's like you're sitting there thinking to yourself, okay, man, it's like, you realize that you want to try to get out of your current employer. And so you go on websites like Indeed and all of this stuff, and you try to do what you can with what you've got. But things just keep falling through, man. It just doesn't work. No matter how hard you work, no matter what it is that you try, it's just like there's just nothing out there. And so you get kind of desperate, and you're like, okay, well, let's see what ChatGPT has to say about all this. And in ChatGPT's defense, or to give it props, it suggested applying to things that were remote. And that was something that I never wanted to do, because I don't like the concept of remote work. I don't look down on people that do remote work or anything like that, man. I mean, if they like that type of work, more power to them. But for me personally, I've done remote work before, and I don't like to turn my home into my my office. And so I always up to that point, I always tried to kind of poo-poo the concept or the idea of remote work, simply because it wasn't something that I wanted to ever get in bed with. But drastic times call for drastic measures, and so I started trying to apply to certain kinds of remote jobs. And I would say in the past maybe 5 months, I've applied to maybe about 4 or 5 remote roles that I felt like I would really be a shoe in for, and I didn't get a single call back. And that's not exactly unexpected, because when you apply to remote roles, you're talking about applying to an opportunity where the entire world is essentially competing for. And that sucks for me because that means that you're then competing against a massive pool of talent that exists out there. And I mean, the bad thing about my situation is that I've spent the past 15 years working on things that I can't really completely put on my resume because it would constitute a breach of certain kinds of professional privacy, you know? It's like you don't I work on certain kinds of things at my job where I'm dealing with certain specific types of things like, I don't know, man, reports, websites, intranets, specific levels of data that I can't be transparent about because it would constitute essentially uh, a breach of certain kinds of privacy that you can't expose to the general public. I mean, I can put down certain kinds of URLs and things like that on my resume, but I got to be kind of careful with what it is that I put on my resume because I can't be too transparent because to do so would be to essentially leak certain kinds of institutional data that you can't leak. So it kind of puts me a little bit of a I don't know. It puts me in a problematic kind of position, and it kind of creates a situation where I've got to find ways to do things on my own outside of the jurisdiction of my employer. And I've got things in motion where I'm trying to fix that. It's just taking a long time because when you deal with a lot with the stuff that I work on, man, there's multiple levels of complexities that you have to work through because we're talking about essentially creating individual websites with their own proprietary types of user interfaces that do specific kinds of things. And so it takes a long time to get through that type of stuff. And it sucks, man. In many ways, I sometimes look back on my life and I sometimes wish that I didn't get involved in the stuff that I'm involved with now. But that's usually only whenever I'm feeling really down and depressed about the stuff that I work on because normally whenever I'm in a decent mood and I'm not really stressing about this type of shit, I actually kind of love what I do because it's wonderful being able to look at a fucking website and break it all down to the point to where you almost know it as well as the back of your fucking hand. You can show me just about any website, and I can look at its interface, I can look at its source code, and I can tell you how that motherfucker is built. And there's power in that, man. It feels good knowing how to do those kinds of things. But it sucks from the standpoint of being able to find ways to balance that with your personal life because I've been in these kinds of situations before where this type of stuff winds up creating problems for a personal life level. And it's sometimes difficult because you've got to find ways to balance the stress that sometimes comes with your professional life because if you sit around and worry too much about your professional life, it causes problems for your personal life. Anyway, long story short, out of all this rambling, what I'm trying to say here is that it's been kind of a long week, not because of like stress or anything like that, but just long from the standpoint of just trying to get through it, I guess. And here I am now on a Friday night, and I've been watching some of this stuff with the CPAC stuff that's been going on. The stuff I mean with like a lot of the Charlie Kirk stuff that they do each year. There's been a lot of discussion in with CPAC particularly this conference stuff that they have because with CPAC, anybody who isn't familiar with CPAC, it's essentially a lineup of speakers for about 3 days, I think it is. They create a program each day where they have about maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 some odd speakers that speak each day about certain kinds of things. All of them are conservative slash GOP type people. and they talk a lot about the current presidency, the current kinds of situations that are going on. Get out there and vote, blah 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 blah. It's the kind of stuff that you normally see whenever election season's coming up, and that's exactly the kind of stuff that they've been talking about here lately. And one of the things that's been discussed a lot lately is this kind of message where the GOP has to maintain cohesion. We can't be infighting with one another. We can't fracture. We've got to maintain teamwork, blah blah blah. And from the standpoint of politics only, it makes sense. But from the standpoint of someone who actually has an ounce of intellect and who doesn't just roll with the punches and go with whatever the collective says, you're sitting there listening to these people cheerlead for Trump, cheerlead for all of these different kinds of things, pushing this message of maintaining cohesion, and you're sitting there thinking to yourself how we've got a president who campaigned on making America great, and yet for the past year to a year and a half, whenever he's been in the headlines, it's always been about something relating to a foreign altercation. And when it first started, it first started with him prodding or joking around with Trudeau in Canada. Hold on a second. I think I'm about to sneeze here. I don't normally do this, but I've got to sneeze, man. Hold on. Excuse me. Uh, anyway, he President Trump campaigned on making America great again, and one of the first things that I feel like I remember him doing was trying to poke a stick at Canada and Trudeau. And then one thing led to another. He got involved with Ukraine, tried to deal with that as best as he could, and then stuff came up with Greenland. And out of all the stuff that we needed to worry about at the time, in my mind, man, I just can't shake the idea that Greenland or annexing Greenland wasn't within the top 100. I'm sorry, it just wasn't. I don't give a shit what anybody says. You can say what you want about Russia and all of the concerns about what Russia's doing up there towards the Arctic or whatever fucking thing it is that they're doing. But I am personally at least not worried about Russia. So unless Trump knows something that we don't, which could very well be likely, the message at least hasn't been conveyed that there's this pressing need to somehow find a way to annex Russia or Greenland. I mean, but anyway, the point is that he started poking sticks then at Greenland, and then he got involved in the whole Gaza situation in Israel, and then the thing happened with Venezuela. Now he's over in Iran. And now I don't know if any of you guys have been paying attention to the local news and some of the snippets that he's been recorded as saying, but now he's beginning to imply or insinuate that he's beginning to pivot his focus on Cuba. And what's ironic about all of this is the fact that he's doing all of this shit with these other countries, but he hasn't once put a single soldier in Mexico. And it kills me personally because I've seen firsthand some of the shit that's going on in Mexico, as I'm assuming most of us have. For anybody who's not living under a rock and knows how to use the internet, you've all seen shit that goes on in Mexico. So to see all this fucking shit going on with all these other countries, but not a single thing being focused towards Mexico, how do you justify that? And how do you say that that's making America fucking great again? Because I don't feel that, man. I do believe that he's done really well with securing our borders, especially the southern border. I do believe that he gets props for that, man. And I'm not completely opposed to everything that's happened with ICE. I know that there's been a few situations here and there that have resulted in pie on his face. in terms of ICE operations and how ICE has conducted itself. And I know that there's been some like key figures in his cabinet that have resulted in a little bit of a PR type of situation that he's been trying to stay ahead of. One is with that Christy Nome lady. I guess there's been some drama that's been going on there. There's been some implication concerning Tulsi Gabbard, which I don't think is really at a boiling point yet. I think for the most part she's okay. But Christy Nome has been an issue, and so I think he's tried to swap her out with someone else. That new guy, I think, if I remember right, I can't remember what his name is. He's the guy, I think, if I remember right, I think it's the guy that that wound up uh, challenging some person during a subcommittee meeting where he was threatening to like get into a fist fight with him. I think it was one of the union people or something like that. I can't fucking remember. But the point is that there's been some PR gaffes or PR debacles here and there, and so you've got the ICE thing with the various PR situations with that. You've got some of the internal cabinet squabbling type stuff, palace intrigue type stuff that's been going on. That's been bubbling up towards the media. You've had the Elon Musk situation during the initial uh, administration type stuff. I think for the most part that's been smoothed out. I don't think there's really any kind of headache right there anymore, but it did happen. But more importantly is this current situation with these foreign altercations, specifically right now with Iran or Iran. So I mean, with all of that stuff though, I feel like it's bubbling up, and to say nothing about how I feel like we're still dealing with high costs, especially with recurring costs, because groceries is one thing, and groceries are still pretty high. The majority of that type of stuff, I think, can be blamed on companies themselves. I don't really associate a lot of that towards the president. And I would say the same thing with Biden. Okay, if Biden were in office, I wouldn't want to give Biden a pass for that, just because I can't stand the Democrats with how they are anymore. But the majority of companies in existence right now that are responsible for things like tangible goods and groceries, they're doing stuff as a result of trying to do whatever it takes for them to increase their bottom line. And I don't really completely blame them for that. Although I do feel like there's got to be something that's got to be done before things get out of hand, because we're still kind of teetering between that zone where things get out of hand. But I feel like one thing that the president can be blamed for is the increases in recurring costs related to things like utilities, taxes, basic service provisions, things like that. Because I know that with every service, every utility that I have, every tax that I have, there's been consistent increases through and through. Insurance, utilities, taxes, constant increases, and nobody seems to be fucking doing a goddamn thing about it, and it's pissing me off, man. And it really pisses me off whenever I think about how that's happening in tandem to the fact that he's sitting there dicking around with Venezuela, with Greenland, with fucking Cuba, Iran, Ukraine, Gaza. It's like, where is making America great again in any of that? And this comes from somebody who is a diehard loyalist for Trump. And by my saying that, man, I want to make sure to emphasize the fact that I do not want for one second believe that that man is above reproach. I'm one of the few kinds of MAGA supporters that can actually critique that motherfucker without any kind of guilt. I don't drink his fucking Kool-Aid. I do believe that the man is a good man, but I do not drink his Kool-Aid. I'm not drunk on his Kool-Aid. I know that the guy has his flaws, and I do my best to try to to try to maintain an unbiased perspective when it comes to some of that stuff. And I know that with me personally, I feel like he's dropping the ball on all sorts of stuff. But the big things being this foreign meddling, this foreign involvement type stuff. Because if there's reasons for us to be over there in Ukraine or Iran right now, and the justification has something to do with terrorism, then the importance has not been expressed or conveyed well enough to sell to the American people, I think. I know that there's a lot of diehard MAGA loyalists and Trump loyalists that would disagree. You know, more power to them. I don't have the energy to deal with those types of people, man. And despite my disapproval of what he's doing right now in those foreign issues, I still support the man. I believe wholeheartedly that the man is a good man. Underneath this persona that you see in things like Daily Mail and Yahoo.com or CNN, you know, I feel like underneath it all, he is a good man and he's got a good heart. And I do believe that he's got the American people, uh, I think he's got their best interests in mind. But with that being said, though, I'm not going to sit here for 1 second and say that everything that he's done has been flawless either, because it hasn't. There's all sorts of problems that he's been at the center of. But I don't know what you do to fix that kind of thing. There's a lot of people out there that act like you just need to give him more time. You need to give him more time. Well, my God, man, he's had more than a year now to make things in motion, and here we are now dealing with basically what's a de facto war with Iran. I don't know, man. I guess I'm just kind of thinking out loud more or less than anything else, but I just don't like where things are going because during my situations right now with my current employer, I'm sitting there half the time each day looking for new job opportunities. And in my area, there's fucking nothing. And now some of that has to do with my specialization or my background, but some of it doesn't have to do with that too, though. And I can't imagine how difficult it has to be for entry level seekers. It's got to be fucking nightmare, man. I mean, all of the jobs that I see half the time on things like Indeed, they're like for management level and up. Management or managers, directors, VPs. Some of that kind of like management level type shit. I think whenever I've been looking for jobs, I think I might have been able to count on one single hand the number of entry level types of jobs that I could see in the listings. And they weren't very general. They were still pretty specific in terms of what it was that the employer was expecting. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that there weren't very many opportunities. There weren't very many opportunities that would apply for someone who's just fresh out of college. And my search terms on Indeed were very, very general. They weren't super specific, and that's worrisome, man. And I just don't think that people are seeing the shit that's on the horizon in this. I hardly ever hear anybody talking about it, and I guess some of it might be the fact that I work in IT. I have a specialty in IT, so I mean my focus is pretty narrow, and I don't know, man. Maybe it's not as bad for somebody that's not as that's not in as much of a narrow focus as I'm in. But I'm a pretty smart motherfucker, man, and I can tell whenever I see entries that are meant more for entry level versus someone of my seniority or a management level or something else, and I'm telling you, man, out of everything that I've seen so far, this country, or at least in my region of the country, there's a fucking bad moon rising, man. There's not enough entry level opportunities for new grads. There's barely enough mid level opportunities for seekers at my level and up, because right now everything right now seems to be focused on management level and up. And what that tells me, because you got to understand that most of the time whenever you're talking about management level and up, you're not really talking about people like at my level that have a specialty. You're talking about the people that manage the people with the specialties, because those are the people that deal a lot with project management type stuff. And if companies are mostly looking for vacancies for those, or looking for candidates for those kinds of vacancies, that tells me, or at least that makes me believe, that the majority of employers out there are getting by on skeleton crews. And that says a lot. And I go out there on various community forums and community type websites like Reddit, for example. And some of the horror stories that I see each day of these people, a lot of them have PhDs or bachelor's degrees or fucking whatever. Fuckers have been unemployed for like a year to 2 years. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what the fuck is going on, man? Because I see a lot of that shit. It's not just one or two cases every once in a while, man. That shit is all over the place. And more power to anyone, because I've got a buddy down in Georgia, man. Really look up to him, because he's a smart motherfucker, man, and he managed to reach six figures without having a degree, and that shit is not easy to do. But I know that he's an outlier. I don't think that everyone is able to do the kinds of stuff that he does. And so I don't know. I don't know where things are headed, man. It's just, I just don't know. It's bothersome. It pisses me off in many ways, because I'm sitting here thinking to myself, where is everything going? Because whenever I voted for Trump, I thought to myself, man, okay, this guy's gonna. I know that he's got his issues, but I believe underneath it all that he's a good man, and he's gonna find ways to make good things happen. And I do believe that he's made a lot of good things happen. But whenever it comes to making America great again, for the past year to a year and a half, it just seems as if he's doing everything except that. He's focusing on all of these other foreign altercations. He's not focusing on job creation for the everyday American. He's tried to do things where he's incentivized big tech to create these big data centers that will, call me crazy, but the big data centers of today's world, they're not going to be staffed with a majority of humans. The majority of shit that goes on in the data center, and this comes from somebody who's worked in data centers before, or at least one data center, the majority of shit that goes on in a data center is mostly automated. It's very, very high level type shit. You've got to have advanced degrees to be able to get your foot in the door of those types of places, to say nothing about needing people that work there to get your foot in that door. A lot of the AI type stuff nowadays is going to facilitate a lot of the operations that are going to be going on in that kind of place. So the construction alone will create maybe hundreds of jobs at first, but once the building is built, those jobs are going to fucking go out the back door, and that entire place is going to be like, that place's operations is going to be staffed by maybe like a really, really fine amount of staff people that all require advanced degrees in specific tech stacks. And so there you've got these big data centers now that are going to increase utility costs. They're going to increase property tax values, which means that you're going to have to pay more for your property taxes. And a lot of these big data centers, they're not really going to be used for the advancement of the voter. It's going to wind up being used in the advancement of the fucking company. Which, in other words, what that means is, like, for example, if Facebook creates a big data center, do you really think that that data center is going to work in your favor? Is that somehow going to translate to something that's going to increase your liberty or your freedoms or reduce censorship? I mean, call me fucking nuts here, but I mean, that's the kind of path that we're on in all of this. So I don't, like I said, man, he's done a lot of stuff to increase data center construction. What else though is there that he's done? Because I'm just not seeing it, man. I mean, he was in the he had a thing here recently where he was trying to advocate for things pertaining to agriculture in ranches, I think. And that shit is super important, man. I can't emphasize how important agriculture is to the United States. But I just don't think that there's been enough substance with anything that he's done, because this another thing with his administration is that everything that he's done up to now has almost been primarily in the form of executive orders. It's not been sanctioned or ratified into law. And if he dicks around with all this other stuff and pisses enough voters off, he's going to lose the House, which means that at some point his administration is essentially done. And when the Democrats get control of the White House again, everything that he's done in the form of an executive order is just going to be wiped out with a pen. It's really frustrating. So I don't, like I said, man, I don't know where everything's going. I know it's been a long week for me. And I know it's finally Friday. And there's a part of me in my heart that wants to like play a video, not only to kind of get away from politics, but just to kind of, I don't know, man, just talk about things that are kind of interesting to me personally. Like I have a video right here. Let me show you something here. Let me see here. I'll refresh it real quick. And with me personally, I'm big on the 80s. So I'm an 80s child. So I wanted to play a video here of the Smiths. It's that song of theirs, it's one of their biggest hits. It's How Soon Is Now. Let me play a quick snippet here real quick. Okay, so you know that song, and I'm stopping it on purpose because of YouTube's fucking copyright bullshit. Because I got stung with that last time whenever I wanted to play Duran Duran's video that I wanted to try to make a commentary about. Because I had all sorts of cool ideas and stuff that I wanted to discuss in that video, but when I uploaded it, I wound up with a copyright strike, so I can't do that, and I'm afraid to post anything that's really long about the Smiths, because one really bad thing right now that's going on in the world of copyright is the fact that there's not any kind of centralized, transparent way to discern who it is that enforces copyright with the holders of their intellectual property. What I'm trying to say here is that if you were to include something like that with your video, like what I'm trying to do here right now, and you played it long enough to where YouTube's shit winds up sensing it and stuff and analyzes your video and realizes that you're trying to include that type of thing and they're copyrighted or something, you don't really know that you're going to wind up with a strike until you've uploaded the thing to YouTube to let them parse everything out. There's not any kind of like transparent database, in other words, that tells you that if you include a snippet of the Smiths and How Soon Is Now in your video, that you'll wind up with a strike. It's not that black and white, unfortunately. But the reason I wanted to include that in this video was just to simply, I don't know, I guess with that song, sometimes it's kind of like what I said earlier in my other video about Duran Duran's Ordinary World, where with that video in particular, I feel like there's this temporary gateway that you get to step into and enter into a different world for a few moments. As to where with the Smiths, this song, How Soon Is Now, whenever you listen to it, at least for me, I feel like I'm part of an underground. It's like, I don't know. it's like there's just some sort of thing there with that with the instrumentation, with the tones, the rhythms and everything else. It's like, I don't know, man. I don't know really what I'm trying to say here, but I know that the Smiths' "How Soon Is Now," it's a really good song. If you've not heard that before, definitely give it a shot. Listen to it, because there's a lot there, I think, in terms of like symbology that kind of plays a part in terms of feeling like you're usurping the man. You know, kind of like what Jack Black would say in School of Rock. You know, stick it to the man. Well, I feel like sometimes Smith's song "How Soon Is Now," it's kind of along those kinds of lines. So anyway, I'm done rambling, man. I was gonna make a RimWorld video, but fuck it, man. I'm so tired and burnt out on everything. I'll try to make one tomorrow sometime if I can. But I hope you guys are doing okay. Hope everything's going smooth for you. Like I said, man, we made it to Friday, and I guess that's really all that matters. So, oh, and by the way, real quick, I uh I don't normally do this. Uh, this past week, or I think it was actually the week before, I ordered a bunch of shit from Amazon. It was kind of a spontaneous order. And like I said, man, I don't normally do this, but it had been a really, really long week the week before, and I said, fuck it, man. You know, I've got to have a reason to wake up each day and have something to look forward to. So I ordered a bunch of shit, and one of those things was a Geiger counter. It's like, why would I have a reason to need a fucking Geiger counter? But I went ahead and ordered one because I've always just kind of wanted one. I was always just kind of interested in it, and here it is. It's I don't know if you can see it or not. See if I can get it into focus here. Uh, get it kind of lined up. I don't know, man. Maybe you can't see it, but it's it says nuclear radiation detector. It's, I guess the product code is FNRST, I think. I don't know, man. It's the GC01, I think it is. And I've tried to like wave it around certain kinds of things in my kitchen and stuff like that. Thankfully, I haven't. It's not really gone off, but I'm interested in getting like a few bananas or something and waving it across there, because I guess bananas, for whatever reasons, have a little bit of radiation to them. So, but I got a Geiger counter. I got a couple little tools here and there. Oh, I got a metal detector. You know, it was $1,000 metal detector, so I'm hoping that it fucking at least finds me a penny. But I got a metal detector. I got a Ninja air fryer, a bigger crock pot. You know, I just got all sorts of shit that I don't really technically need, but I said fuck it, man. I had some money kind of saved up, so I figured fuck it, let's just go ahead and get some stuff. So anyway, but I've been too tired to mess with it, man. Like I said, this week's been a long week. I haven't had any energy to do anything. So anyway, tomorrow I'm gonna try to make another RimWorld video, pick up from where we left off with that, and just leave it at that, man. So anyway, I'm gonna end this video here. Keep your chin up, no matter what's going on, no matter what kind of side of the aisle you're on. Try to find ways to be Americans for each other. Look past our differences. And get a good drink every once in a while. So anyway, you guys have a good Friday night, man. I'll see you.